we'll make this recording available to everyone in our YouTube channel, so that if someone did miss it, then they'll be able to watch a recording of it. We don't have all the answers by any means, but we hope that we can at least answer some of your questions. The FCC order that was issued on May 11th was pretty heavy reading, and not everyone wants to sit there and read it. So yes, we can share the slides before the presentation. Will someone in the LCT team please post it in the chat? I sent the presentation to everyone. So I'm going to go ahead and get started. Again, if you are just joining, we've got 35 people here now. 52 people have registered. If you have any questions, raise your hand or post a question in the chat, and we'll go ahead and get started. So the Emergency Connectivity Fund is it's based on an actual. It was based on an actual appropriations rather than based on the Universal Service Fund. So it's going to be handled a little bit differently than the E-rate program. So if you may or may not be currently participating in the E-rate program, and I just want you to know that it's okay if you're not currently participating in the E-rate program. That doesn't mean you cannot participate in the Emergency Connectivity Fund, but there's some things that you should know. So first of all, we're going to go through the performance goals of the Emergency Connectivity Fund. We'll talk about who's eligible for the fund, eligible equipment and services, and how things are going to be allocated per, whether it's a per person or a per location, and what that means for libraries, eligible uses, and the support amounts. We'll also talk a little bit about waste, fraud, and abuse, which is a term that's used in a lot of things that have to deal with the government. And basically, they want to make sure that these funds are used in the way that they're intended and not used in a way that's going to be using the fund for something that isn't eligible. So mainly, this fund is for remote learning, but it's not just for remote learning. Some librarians may wonder, well, this is a public library. We're not teaching anybody. Maybe a patron wants to check out a hotspot or something, but they're not necessarily using it for school. That's okay. They're talking about the eligible use as a public library. So it's basically to connect students, school staff, and library patrons who would otherwise lack adequate access to connected devices and broadband connectivity during the pandemic. So it's not just about school, it's about how you can serve your patrons and serve the, basically fulfill the public library's role in this, in the community. And another goal is to ensure that it's efficiently and effectively administering the Emergency Connectivity Fund. But they're hoping that everything is going to move quickly as far as processing all of the applications and forms. And then they're also making sure that there's price transparency, and so they're going to publish all of the data publicly in the E-rate open data platform, or the USAC open data platform. And for those of you who are not currently participating in the E-rate program, I can tell you how to access that. So who's eligible? It's basically, they use the same definition of eligible schools and libraries that they use for the E-rate program. They have to make sure that they're not for profit, that they don't have an endowment of $50 million or more. You can't, if you're a public library, you can't be also part of a school or have your budget associated with the school. and you have to make sure that you are eligible for LSTA funds. Those are the current litmus tests for public libraries, and that's going to also be in effect for the ECF program. Tribal libraries are also eligible for ECF funding. It looks like there's some difficulty in uploading or sending the slides, and I'm sorry about that. What we can do is after this program, we'll send you the slideshow. I apologize if that's an issue. I know that some of you wanted to take notes on the slides, but it looks like that the chat is having some difficulty in getting those and uploading the slide deck. So please ask questions, or if you need me to slow down, if I'm moving too fast, let me know. So, hotspots, modems, routers, devices that combine a modem and router, connected devices, including installation, activation, taxes, and fees are all eligible for the ECF program. That's usually things like we consider mobile broadband. So, if you may or may not currently be using these types of services, but we're talking about an air card, a little brick device that you can use to access the internet through a cellular service. We're also talking about wireless internet access. We're talking about, in some cases, even services to connect somebody at their house to a traditional cable or DSL internet service. And for most public libraries, that may be a difficult thing to do, especially considering all of the other factors that are involved. But those are things that are eligible in the ECF program. Laptops and tablets are also eligible. They're considered to be eligible connected devices. And if it comes with 2 cords, it's okay. I know in E-rate, if you have something that's redundant, that's a bad word. But in this case, if something comes with an extra component, they're not going to ding you on it and make you cost allocated. They're trying to simplify it the best way they can. What's not eligible is you can't buy a desktop computer. You're not talking about adding public access computers to the library. We're not talking about cell phones. We can't use it to pay for our filtering for E-rate or for ECF. You can't say, oh, I would really like to extend my library's internet access to my community. So I want to put a wireless radio out and broadcast my internet that I'm using in the library to my patrons. It's a little bit more difficult than that. That's not something that this program is intended for. It's really about just providing connectivity where people cannot get it, but this program is not going to accommodate all of the people who need it, unfortunately. Although there is no minimum bandwidth, so that's a good thing. And depending on what's available in your community, you may or may not be able to provide higher bandwidths. I know that many of you are small public libraries in small rural communities, and you are limited in what you can provide. So unfortunately, I think that there are a lot of people who are frustrated in that respect. So, a lot of this stuff I know is really oriented towards schools more than public libraries, but libraries should maybe think about how they can think outside of the box and how they can use this program to help their patrons. So the idea is to provide maximum flexibility. So if maybe there's a community center that students go to do homework or something like that, that's something that's an eligible place that you can use the Emergency Connectivity Fund to finance E-rate. Things like that. I keep going back towards that mobile broadband card type thing because That seems to be something that fits in with the idea of checking out something to patrons. You know, you have a device that you can check out. The mobile Wi-Fi, the fixed wireless, you know, those types of things are something that can be provided a little bit more flexibly to patrons. It must be used primarily for educational purposes, and for libraries, that means just, you know, for what you would normally use inside a public library. Think about what your patrons do when they come in and use your public access computers. They use your public access computers to do, in many cases, things they would do at home. They apply for jobs, they do their homework, they, in some, I guess during COVID, for those libraries that were open, they may have even attended work remotely from your library. So the educational purpose definition is an activity that's integral, immediate, and proximate to the education of students in the case of a school, and activities that are integral, immediate, and proximate to the provision of library services to library patrons in the case of a library. So that's the traditional E-Ray definition, and that's also the definition for ECF. And so if you are provided connected devices, a connected device, that means maybe an iPad or a Chromebook or a laptop. If you're going to check something like that out and using the ECF program, you would want it to be something that would be limited to that person who's checking out the device. And that would be something that would be password protected with a username and password. There are some limitations on how much you can spend for these devices. So a connected device, that would be, again, a laptop or an iPad or some sort of tablet. You can spend up to $400 per device. If you are talking about a hotspot, up to $250. If you are purchasing Wi-Fi or modems and routers, they're not specifically putting a dollar amount on it, but they want you to use a reasonable litmus test, and you have to decide how that fits in with the definition of what you need to do. So if you are if you're thinking about doing this and you're pricing it out, I know that in many cases, connected devices are right now in demand and may be more expensive than $400. They would supply the money up to the $400, and then you would have to come up with the rest. So we're expecting that a window is going to be opening soon. Yesterday I attended a webinar, and what I understand is that Jessica Rosenworcel, the acting chairwoman of the FCC, wants this first window to open sometime between the middle and end of June. So I would expect that ESAC will be announcing the first window very soon, maybe in the next week. I think their limitations are they're trying to figure out how to set all of this up. So that's going to determine when this window will open. It'll be a 45-day window, and it will be for services that are prospective. That's services that you will be implementing between July 1st, 2021 and June 30th, 2022. I know that initially when they started talking about this, they were thinking about doing it the other way around, and first having a retroactive window that allowed you to get reimbursed for things that you purchased during the pandemic from the beginning, but they've actually flipped it. So we're talking about right now, the window that's going to be opening is for things that you're going to need in the future. And you must wait until July 1st to receive the items and pay for the items. That's very important. So if it's ordered now, that may be okay if you can pause it, because you have to make sure that it's delivered on or after July 1st and it's paid for on or after July 1st. And this window is for services that are going to be delivered between July 1st and June 30th. If there's enough money after that, they may open other windows. They may open another window that's similar to that one for prospective purchases, or they may go ahead and move on to the second window being a retroactive thing where they go back and they say anything between March 2020 and June 30th, 2021, you can seek reimbursement for items that you purchased that fit the definition of this litmus test that we were talking about. The windows are going to be 45 days. They're not going to require a specific competitive bidding process, although they do want you to follow state and local procurement rules. So if you have to do an RFP, then you would have to do an RFP. I know that many people want to use, maybe some state contracts, and I know that DIR has some state contracts that can be used if you're thinking about it. If for some reason your request is denied, the appeal deadline is 30 days after the decision, so keep that in mind. And if the demand during the initial window exceeds the amount of funding, they're going to use the current E-rate category 1 breakdown for discounts to determine how they're going to allocate those funds. The invoicing process, so how do you get the money? You can either use, these are E-rate terms, and so I know some of you are not currently using E-rate. So the BEAR process stands for Billed Entity Applicant Reimbursement. That's for services that an applicant pays in full and then seeks reimbursement after they pay the bill. SPI, or Service Provider Invoicing, is for when an applicant purchases a service that is funded by these programs, then the service provider can allocate the discounts directly to the bill, and then the applicant only pays for their non-discounted portion. Because this is a 100% reimbursement program, of course, you would only have to pay for anything over what the caps would be, and anything that's not eligible that was part of your order. Now, in the ECF program, service providers are not required to apply the discount to the bill. They're not required to use SPI invoicing if you want them to. They're only going to be required to do it if they elect to do it. So you would have to get some sort of a statement from the service provider saying that they agree to do that service provider invoicing. Otherwise, you will be looking at paying for it out of pocket and getting reimbursed. Now, they are allowing you to get reimbursed before you pay, but you have to also receive the service before you invoice. So that would be something like you would order a device, you would get it in, and then you would have to invoice USAC, and then you pay the bill within 30 days. So you'd have to make sure that the service provider is okay with that. When you submit your invoices for reimbursement, they will want to see the invoices to show that that you did order it and you did receive it. And you have a deadline of 60 days after the funding commitment decision letter or revised funding commitment decision letter or the service delivery date. A service delivery date, what we're talking about is, for instance, if you are getting discounts on a monthly service, such as a mobile broadband card that you have to pay for monthly, you can wait until you have gone through the entire year till June 30th and then submit the invoice within 60 days of that. Or you can submit invoices monthly as you need to. Another thing that's different from the E-rate program is that all applicants for the ECF program must be registered in the System for Award Management, which is called SAM, and it's a federal website, and it's kind of a contracting website. So make sure that you are, if you are going to be using the ECF program, that you're registered there. Some applicants I know are already in there, but there is a renewal period. So double check and make sure that your account is still active if you have an account with SAM. Service providers that are providing service provider invoicing also have to be in SAM. Now, for many of you who are not participating in the E-rate program, many of you are not doing that because of the Children's Internet Protection Act requirements. Children's Internet Protection Act requirement is that an applicant have an internet safety policy addressing behavior of minors and the filtering of the internet access that minors receive. So they've released new guidance on this particular for SIPA and E-rate. So pay really close attention to this, especially if you are a current participant in E-rate. So if you currently own devices and your library is receiving if you currently receive E-rate discounts, your devices have to be filtered. It's not necessarily about just the internet. So for instance, your patron computers that are in the library, a lot of them are desktop computers. Those have to be filtered, but any device that the library owns has to be filtered as well. So if you are currently receiving E-rate discounts, or if you're going to be receiving ECF discounts, and you check out a device, an end user device, such as a laptop, that device needs to be filtered. If you are using non-E-rate funded internet, then the devices don't have to be filtered. And if you are just providing internet access and you're not providing an end user device, then it doesn't require SIPA compliance. So it's basically mainly about the device and the filtering of the device. If you are participating in the E-rate program and you were funded and you filed a Form 486 for the 2021 funding year already, then you don't have to file another 486 or another certification of compliance with SIPA. You would check that you'd already done that. But if you are not currently participating in E-rate, or if you haven't filed a Form 486 yet, then you would need to certify your compliance. Excuse me. So, waste, fraud, and abuse protection. There are specific data retention requirements, which I know as a former public librarian, it kind of gave me a little bit of heartburn about this. So if you are checking out devices, you will need to maintain specific data elements about the people who are going to be checking out the devices. So you have to maintain asset inventories for the devices. And then for devices provided to individuals, you need to track the device type, like a laptop, a mobile hotspot, the make and model of the device, the equipment serial number. That means that you have to identify the specific thing that was checked out. You also need to track the name of the person and the dates the device was loaned out and returned to the school or library. If it's a device for multiple users, such as if you're going to provide wireless access in a community center or a bus or something like that, you need to track the device type, the make and model, the equipment serial number, the name of the employee who's responsible, and the dates the equipment was in service. If it's provided to an individual, somebody that's checking out the device. So it's the type of service, In some cases, if you're providing access to the home, this is one of those things that you would need to make sure you're tracking. The broadband plan details, upload, download speeds, monthly cap if there is one, the name of the person to whom the service was provided, if it's a fixed broadband service, service address, installation date, and the last day of service. The services that are provided to multiple users is the type of service, broadband plan details, the name of the employee responsible for the service, the description of the service area. That means if it's a wireless service, whatever the description is, it's a community center or whatever, the installation date and the last day of service. So you have to keep track of that as well. And so if you say that a lot of people wonder, what if somebody loses it? What if they take it away and don't return it? And then all those people who have missing books that library patrons aren't returning. What if they don't return the hotspot or the laptop? You would have to make sure that you maintain a record of that it was not checked, not returned, or it was broken, somebody spilled Fanta on the keyboard, whatever it was. You would need to just make sure that you put a note in the record as to what it was that put that particular device out of commission. You need to retain the record for 10 years after the last day of service. And so if you don't know specifically the needs of the patrons, you do need to get a statement from them saying that they would lack the access to the equipment or services if not for the library support. So you would need to get that statement from them and retain it for 10 years after the last day of service. The gift requirements are also similar to E-rate. You can't get extra bonus items from the service providers. There is a partial waiver of the gift rule. So if say a service provider throws in the hotspot with your service or whatever, it's okay as long as it's directly related to the pandemic need and it's before June 30th, 2022. If you're going to be applying for the ECF program, you're going to need to make some certifications. One regards the fact that you have abided by all of your state and local procurement rules. And if there is no rule that you followed your own rules. You can't be reimbursed through other federal programs. So if you've already started working on, maybe you've got some federal funds and you've purchased some devices, you can't double dip. You can't also get reimbursed from ECF. Maybe, if you have a contract that ends, you could apply for future use, but for stuff that's already paid for, you need to make sure that you're documenting exactly what was paid for by each program. One of the things that could be an issue is that there is another program called the Emergency Broadband Benefit Program that regular citizens can apply for internet access on their own and receive this benefit. It's like $75 a month for their internet access. So you need to make sure that if you're going to be checking out something to one of your patrons, that they're not also receiving that EBB program benefit. This is only for unmet needs. So if someone already has access to these services, then they are not qualified, not eligible. So again, that's where that document requiring your patron to say that they didn't have access to it without this, and it has to be used. So you shouldn't you shouldn't ask for something unless you really know that you're going to have specific people who are going to need it. Now, how do you determine that? I'm not sure. I think it's a good thing for for discussion. There will be audits. They've said specifically that there will be audits, especially in cases where they think that someone may have received EBB funding that they've also received access to the ECF funds. Excuse me. They may want to see all of the documentation about the services and the equipment that you purchased, how you use the services, and anything that can be used to show compliance, including those pieces of paper, the statements from your patrons that showed that they had no access, if not for this thing that you're checking out to them. And they may ask you to de-anonymize a specific document. So in some cases, you may provide redacted information. This person signed the form, and so I did what I was supposed to do, and they may say, well, we want to know who this person is, and so they may ask for that. So libraries that are participating in ECF should make sure that they follow the 10-year documentation rules, and that's going to be a big challenge for libraries that don't currently retain documentation about patron checkouts and things like that. So you would need to figure out how you're going to, what your policy is going to be about these devices. So you should definitely check your privacy policy. And you may also want to talk to your attorney about what the laws are regarding privacy in libraries in Texas. So you can't transfer any equipment that's purchased using these funds for 3 years after it's purchased. After 3 years, the FCC considers it to be obsolete, and then you can then sell it or on eBay or however you normally dispose of your public equipment. And it's up to you to determine how best that you can use it after the pandemic is over. So as long as it's for educational purposes, you use it within the library, or you're still checking it out, those types of things that you normally do as a library, then you should definitely, then that would be sort of fit in with what is allowed. You know, if you have an iPad that's used to provide digital books or something like that. So what do you do now? The window is going to be opening probably in the next couple of weeks. It's going to be a 45-day window, which is not very long. It's only a little bit over a month. So you need to think about how you would identify the patrons who have an unmet need. For regular library users, that's something that you may know already, but you may have library patrons that live in your community that need this service that you can provide. How do you determine who needs it? How do you know if they already are participating in EBB? Would you do a survey? Things like this. You're not going to have a whole lot of time to do this, so you should definitely get organized. If you currently loan hotspots or devices, could you may already have a contract that you've paid for, but maybe how could you repurpose this in the future for ECF funding? If you, again, you'll need to make sure that if you do any sort of a survey or ask the patron to fill something out, that you include that EBB program and make sure that they're not using that as well. So this is the ECF prioritization matrix. If there is not enough funding to meet demand, then this is how they would prioritize the discounting of the program if there wasn't enough money to meet demand. So that's a lot of information, and it looks like there are a lot of questions about how exactly filtering works. If the library owns devices, they should definitely be filtered, especially if they're getting E-rate or ECF. If the say if the library is providing hotspots to the patrons, then and the patron is using their own end user devices to access the internet, then that doesn't have to be filtered. So Ed, will the program cover multiple types of equipment such as laptops, tablets, plus equipment for hearing and vision impaired individuals? So that's a good question. That is, they did address the needs of hearing and vision impaired individuals and other types of special needs. There may be a way to increase the eligibility of funding for those types of services, but it's going to have to be done on a case-by-case basis. And Henry also says in the chat that, and this is true, right now, if you are considering using this ECF funding and you don't currently apply for E-rate, go ahead and get registered in EPC. Excuse me, I'm going to cough for a second. Sorry about that. Okay, you need to access the E-rate Productivity Center portal now. You'll need to get an FCC registration number, and you'll need to access the SAMS, get a SAMS number and register for that. Those are things that you can do now, even if you aren't going to do it. Maybe you're thinking about doing it. Maybe you don't know for sure you're going to do it. It doesn't hurt to go ahead and get in there and just get access now. Warranties are covered, and then we'll do a 3-year warranty as long as there's not an extra cost for that warranty. So be careful of that some service providers charge extra for a 3-year warranty or charge extra for a warranty. It's only for an item that includes a warranty as part of the purchase of the device. So what if we already own the hotspots and need the service plan renewed? Still okay in this as long as the renewal date falls between July 1st and June 30th. We received these hotspots from a previous pandemic grant. So as long as it's already, so you wouldn't be able to get reimbursed for something that you already got reimbursed for, but if that ends and you no longer have that funds, you can probably apply for it. Just make sure that you document that funding source has run out and you don't have a way to pay for it. So let's see what else. Henry says there may be a way to maintain anonymity of the person to avoid privacy issues, and that's for those statements. I've been thinking about that, you know, if you have some sort of a map, patron number X, you know, is identified as this number, and they sign, as, you know, some sort of way, I don't know, that I'm sure that the American Library Association will provide some really good ideas for libraries that are concerned about privacy of their patrons. Let's see what else. So the quote for $29.05 a month per hotspot with the 250, does that mean I should only get 8 hotspots to stay within the $250 per month? Let me clarify that $250 per month. Some people purchase a device that provides the internet access. Some people lease the device that offers the broadband internet access, and then they have to pay a monthly fee. The purchase of the device is, so if you're purchasing a device, the limit on that device is $250. There is no cap on the monthly service costs. It just has to be considered to be reasonable. And how do we know how many you can get? Well, you can get as many as you need to get, but you have to be able to document the need. So you'll have to get creative on how you're going to figure out what that need is. Perhaps there's some data in your community on who is at a certain poverty level, or you can do a survey. I keep saying that, and there's not a whole lot of time to do the survey. So if you're going to do a survey, I'd get cracking now. If you maybe have some data in your county or in your civic area, you may be able to use that as a projection of how many you might need. Unfortunately, there's no direction from the FCC on exactly how you should determine that. That's sort of the burden is on you, unfortunately. Henry may have some ideas. Henry, I'm gonna, Henry, would you like to address that? I don't know if the state library has any direction on that. I'm gonna go ahead and.
Is this for, you mean the anonymity issue?
Yes, for the anonymity, and also and how to determine the poverty or the need, the unmet need. How would you determine how many devices you should get to address your unmet need, or how do you determine how many people have an unmet need?
Yes, this is something that I'm working with the other state E-rate coordinators across the country looking at this issue. So we will have more information about that because it's definitely something we want to provide resources for. So if you don't know me, I'm Henry Stokes, the library technology consultant at the Texas State Library. Hi, everybody. And I'm also the state E-rate coordinator for Texas Libraries. And I wanted to thank E-rate Central for hosting the webinar today and providing all this great information. I also wanted to extend an invitation to, if you don't have my contact info, to go ahead and I'll put, if we could put my email in the chat, that to go ahead and email me if you're interested in this program, or even just hotspots and laptop acquisition and lending in general, because I'm putting together a lot of resources, not for that, and I'd love to get everybody kind of working together and kind of create a community of practice about that. There's a lot of opportunities coming up in this, not just ECF. So not only did the on the federal level, the American Rescue Plan Act, ARPA, provided millions of dollars to the state library to support these kinds of things, but also the state legislature surprisingly did as well. So we've got a lot of funding coming our way outside of the ECF issue. So there may be an opportunity beyond that to be, get involved with grants and things that will have different requirements than ECF. But ECF is also a great program. So if you email me, I'll put you on an email list. We'll set up a group. And of course I'll include the E-rate Central folks, but if need be, but we'll basically I'll be sharing resources like that. How do you talk about the poverty level? How do you deal with the privacy issues? And we don't know yet a lot about the actual application, even what the portal looks like yet, because they haven't shared that. So I'll be doing training and tips and things like that as needed too. So thanks for your time, but yeah.
I understand that the way that it's going to look is something like there's going to be some sort of a splash page. You'll be able to access either ECF or EPC, the E-rate portal, through the same authentication methods. I also understand that they're not using the same BEAR process that they use for E-rate, so that's going to be it's going to look different than the current BEAR. So if you're already applying for E-rate, be prepared for your invoicing process to look a little different than you've been accustomed to for the ECF fund. The other thing, going back to what Henry said about all of these different opportunities, this program has a finite period. It goes away after a while, and so if you're going to be purchasing a device, it's not a bad idea to think about the what's next. How are you going to use this piece of equipment after the pandemic? It's a really good opportunity to provide connectivity to your patrons, especially those people who have been disconnected. I know my mother has internet, but I know that during the pandemic specifically, she talked about, you know, being by herself all the time and things like that. And I think giving someone the opportunity to have a connection to the outside world can be freeing to people. So I think it's a really good opportunity for libraries. So are there any other questions? I will, if you like, we're going to probably upload this webinar to our YouTube channel. We can send that out and share it. We'll also be able to maybe send a couple of other links to information that might be helpful in your process. And Henry is a great resource, so make sure that you contact him. It sounds like he's on the ball and getting everything set up for libraries to be able to determine what their unmet needs are and how they can implement this program of checking out devices to their patrons. I know that that's going to be a challenge, especially for small libraries with not very many resources. So good luck to all of you. If you have any other questions, it's one last call for any other questions about ECF. Okay, well, I don't see any other questions, so we will we'll go ahead and end our webinar. Thank you so much for participating, and have a great weekend, everybody.